All right, everyone, if you wouldn't mind, we're going to go ahead and get started.
Let's go. What's Davey? Oh, ladies?
No, you're good. You're good.
How you doing? You doing okay?
You're good. They went over just a little bit, so I won't start yelling yet.
My shoe. I stepped on my shoelace.
Thank you. I don't get that much attention when I yell at home. All right. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Our next session here is the Compliance and Enforcement and Producer Licensing of Regulator discussion. Today, who we have up here, I think everyone probably recognizes faces up here. I'm going to go down the list, even though I had it ready to do a different way. They set wrong. So we've got Lori.
There were no name tags.
Yeah, all right. Okay. 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 All right. Fair enough. To my left, first we have Lori Gasser, and she's with Louisiana Department of Insurance. Woo! I'll hold for applauses, yes. Richard Toza, and he's with the Virginia Department of Insurance.
Oh, look at you.
Lee Helen Webb, and she's with Kentucky Department of Insurance. All right, all right. And last but definitely not least is Dave Buono from Pennsylvania. Oh, wow. That's fantastic. Okay, so I am going to go through real quick some of the learning objectives, everything, let you guys know what we're going to do, and then we're going to jump right into it. My eyes were bigger than my stomach, so to speak. We're going to cover a lot, and I'm going to try to get through it. Richard did warn me, it's not a lightning round.
Pages of questions.
Okay. So just to let everyone know, obviously you can see the learning objectives up there. We're going to try to hit on all these areas here. And in doing so, we do want interaction. I want to cover everything that I can, but at the same time, if there are questions, I think everyone's completely comfortable with the fact that we want to hit on them as they come up. And some of the topics that we are going to see are right up there. I'm going to leave that up there, and we are going to jump right in. First question. We're going to talk about remote testing, exams. What are the primary challenges faced by regulators and candidates using remote testing on insurance exams? And Lori, since you're right there, I'm going to start with you.
People are cheating. And I don't have to be too loud here, but it's not like the cheating like when high school chemistry class, when you have people and they're all furtive and they're pulling out that crumpled piece of paper and no one's seeing their little cheat sheet, because you actually still do see that in the test centers. It's so cute because the camera's on them and there's a proctor watching them and no one sees you with that sweaty piece of paper you pulled out of your pants. It's gross. So they always get caught. But see, now in the remote testing world, when it's just the camera on you, there was cheating. Louisiana decided to terminate remote testing last year because we found incidents of cheating. What was a concern for us that it wasn't that you had the little cheat sheet on the side, but it was where someone was actually taking the test for you. And that's a real problem. So finding out, the ways to mitigate that online cheating. And I just, when we were starting to look at it, I'm like, this can't just be, just a Louisiana thing. So I actually if you just, you have 5 minutes, go on YouTube and Google how to cheat on an online proctored exam. And there are multiple how-to videos on how you could be successful in doing this. So I know it's not just the insurance space. It's probably in every industry where COVID showed us that we had to come up with a solution real fast to we can't leave our house for anything kind of environment. And I know it's not just in the insurance space, but it's probably more prevalent than I think we all want to realize. And that has certainly posed a regulatory challenge that our decision was just don't do it. Richard.
Thank you, Lori. Yeah, please go down the line, and if you have anything to add, let's start here.
Well, I was going to speak about integrity of exams, but Lori's covered it really well, and I know there's a question a little bit later when we talk about security of exams, but two areas I would touch on. One is the broadband access, because there's a lot of states with a lot of rural areas where broadband is not available. And even today in Virginia, we're still trying to reach all almost rural communities to provide that broadband access, because without it, it's one of those barriers to industry, right? If you have to drive 4 hours to get to a test center, a brick and mortar test center, that's a barrier for a lot of people. So broadband access is one area, which Virginia is tackling as we speak. Another area would be developing question pools to accommodate online testing, because when we started going down the remote exam road, which was just happened to be around the pandemic time, if you recall, prior to the pandemic, there was probably not more than, 5 or 6 states that had remote testing. And then Virginia was right in the middle of an RFP. We had a proposal from one of the 3 Ps, and they were offering us remote exams, and we just jumped right onto that bandwagon right out the gate in 2020, which was just perfect timing. But what we obviously need to understand is that remote testing opens up your exam to the entire world now at this point, and your exam pools, if you have limited questions in those pools, then all that content is quickly out there. And so that is another area. I think some states actually probably had separate sets of questions for remote exams, or limited the number of times you can take the exam remotely because the content was limited. So they're the 2 areas I can come up with for you, Greg. All right?
Great.
I'm not sure why I'm on this panel, because we don't offer remote exams. And we did consider it, of course, because of the pandemic. And a lot of the obstacles were the same as what Richard mentioned. Kentucky has a lot of rural areas that do not have internet access, or a good internet access. And it was not something that we heard from our resident applicants. It was generally the organizations that were trying to get every state on board so that they, wouldn't be down in their recruiting processes. But the cost, for one, was going to be additional than what we had in our law. And, the process of getting any kind of fee increased takes legislation and takes a lot of time. So instead, we do have 14 other testing locations. We contract with Kentucky Community and Technical Colleges in order to offer these spread across the state in strategic areas where that any person won't have to drive more than, an hour and a half at the very most to get to a testing center. And those are especially in the rural areas. But we do have that in place. And then we also, instead of doing remote testing during the pandemic, we offered a temporary license. And that's something that we had never opened up that way before. And it was very successful. I think we had about 110 applicants that took advantage of that. And, we had a lot of guidance and guardrails around that process. But, we worked it out the best we could. And we were only down with our exams for a very short time, a very short few months.
So I'm glad Lee's here because I actually took my test in Kentucky, and I had to drive to Frankfurt, and it's probably one of the hardest tests I've ever taken. And after I'm done, the person was kind enough to look at my sheet, give me a frowny face, and go, "You passed." So I just need to let Lee know that was not cool, because I thought I failed with that look. But in PA, I think some of the challenges that we have are a lot of the same as everyone else, with software challenges, rooms not meeting requirements. We even run into issues in relation to candidates not meeting residency requirements when it comes to some of our exams. So I kind of echo what everybody else is saying, and we have those same challenges.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna piggyback on that with a little bit of a 2-part question, probably really more of a 3-part question. So, what is being done to ensure the integrity with all these issues of the remote proctored exams. And with that, how do the remote proctoring practices address the issue of exam security and potential cheating? And a little caveat with this, how do you work with the exam vendors doing that? And I'm going to pick on Richard.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Greg. We talked about integrity exams, and so you had a two-part question here, so
Yes.
I will probably run it all together into
That's
one answer.
great.
But, I think what you need to do is first work closely with your exam vendors. The technology has come leaps and bounds even since 2020 when we first initiated our remote exams. Virginia has a really great vendor that does our exams for us. And they have some really robust security protocols in place. We have the security check-in where, the proctor is examining the room to make sure that there's nothing else in the room, cheating, cheat notes like the old-fashioned paper notes. And obviously to make sure that everything is all above board. But also during the exam, of course, we have with proctoring, a physical proctor. We also have artificial intelligence now being injected into that process. And so artificial intelligence can pick up the telltale signs of people cheating, looking around, looking down, body movements. But for states that are a little concerned about how secure their remote exams are, I would implore you to first talk to your exam vendors because they're the experts. I'm not an expert in remote exams. I'm not an expert in security or IT infrastructure, but they are. And these guys know what they're doing. And I think that if you talk to your exam vendors and you get to see the process from beginning to end, like we did in Virginia recently, we actually met with our vendor to go through the security protocols that they had in place. And I won't divulge any secrets, but it was really thorough. It was really robust. And it kind of gave us a high level of confidence. So even though Lori had mentioned that there was some major cheating going on, I know there was a case in Florida that kind of was in the news. But, we decided that remote exams were still very important for us as a state to continue to have. So with that said, did I miss anything?
No,
Did I cover it all?
You covered it. And I'm
Checking
seeing nods from the panelists. Is there anyone who would care to chime in extra? I mean, I feel like he did cover.
I'll chime in on that.
Yeah,
Like-
please.
Even with the Louisiana experience, we did work closely with our exam vendor. And I think when we came across these things, we didn't initially expect to find. Once you started to figure out what things to look for, what data points when you're looking at your exam results, when you start honing in on, what are the data points that are going to stick out like sore thumbs once you know what you're looking for, like these big red flags, but you wouldn't have thought to look for these things before because they didn't occur that this is how this was going to pan out. So all these little lessons learned along the way are what the exam vendors are now using to be proactive rather than reactive to situations and do what they can to mitigate. Now, another thing for a state to consider whether or not they're going to maintain or not use remote testing is, the accessibility of the exam. In Louisiana, we did a look at the accessibility of our exam sites, and we found 99% of our license applicants lived within 1 hour of a test site. So access to taking an exam was not an issue. There was ready access to get to take the exam without undue travel. So there was no real necessity for it, and the broadband in our rural areas actually would have made remote testing even more difficult for those test takers. So keeping just the test center exams actually just made sense for us at that time. But another thing to consider, like with all the technology, we've heard about AI all morning and all the wonderful things that technology can do. We found that a lot of our cheating incidents was super low tech, like literally somebody hiding under the desk, out of the sight of the camera with their hand just like this, clicking the keys. I mean, how do you detect that? That's like 7-year-old technology. We're figuring that stuff out. how does a computer program detect that hidden person who crawled in crab walking when the camera wasn't looking on him? That's really hard to detect. So we have a lot of things that are in place that are keeping it more secure, but are we always going to be that step ahead? And that's what I think about it late at night.
Very good. No, great, great. And I was going to ask a question a little bit about the future of remote testing, but I feel like you guys kind of hit on that, and I understand that that's pretty broad and difficult. So we're going to jump ahead a little bit to more of a little bit of enforcement side here. And my question is going to go towards when a fraudulent application from a resident producer using another person's ID typically is discovered. So how is that discovered? Is that through consumer complaints, carrier reporting, active market surveillance by the department? How do you guys find that?
A couple different ways. The vendor that we use has this facial recognition. So there are times that you can notice it while it's happening. If that occurs, the vendor lets us know, and then we investigate it a little bit further. We also do fingerprinting with applications, so if something isn't lining up properly, we may find it out there. And then also consumer complaints or issues.
Great. Lori?
Actually, what we normally find in Louisiana is kind of the opposite. It's the non-residents who are trying to backdoor in, who are really residents to start with. Like our resident apps, we're going to, you're going to fingerprint, so you're going to show identification there. When you're sitting for the exam, you're showing identification. So that's, for the most part, is not an issue. But what we have, is any representative from the Texas Department of Insurance in the room?
I don't believe for one second, not one.
Okay. Jody Delgado and I are having long conversations about, so this is cool. We have what I call the fake Texans. And I think this is just the natural human tendency to find the easiest path to something, whether that truthfully is the easier path or it's the perceived easier path. But you will have situations where I know we will have our residents who will take a class, qualify for a license in another state that they believe it was easier to qualify in. They will apply for a resident license in that state using an address in that state that might be their grandma's, it might be the pre-licensing school, it could be the Flower Mound, Texas shopping mall. I don't know if it was the China King or the nail salon, that was their address, but Google Maps wasn't very specific. But it's kind of crazy that they would do all of these fraudulent things and then apply to Louisiana as a non-resident, or I'm doing a state-to-state transfer, I just moved, so apparently your accommodations at the nail salon were not adequate, that you had to move back to Baton Rouge. But it's usually, the way we find that is really simple, because as clever as they were to go through this deception to get this other state license and kind of backdoor into Louisiana, they give it away on their application. You could tell, like, I'm a Texas resident, but I work at the Baton Rouge Walmart. Like, how does that work? How's that commute from Houston working? Or they'll occasionally have a background disclosure, and all of their criminal activity took place in Louisiana. Like, how are you reporting to the probation officer here when you lived out of state and I didn't see any jurisdictional things going on here? So they usually will give it away, and we detect that pretty quickly. And those usually end up in very some unhappy people who do just have to take our test again.
Thank you. Richard?
So to build on what Lori just said, the producers or the applicants are trying to find the easiest route into the industry, right? These are the bad actors that we're looking at. Not all, some are just trying to find the easiest exam that they can take, but also from the application perspective, if your state doesn't fingerprint, doesn't verify citizenship, doesn't do any kind of background at all, it's the honor system, then that's the easiest state to get into. And then from there on, all the non-resident states, we're required to just basically let you come in as long as you check all the boxes on the application form. So I think it goes back to what Karen was saying earlier. You know, we need more uniformity, not just reciprocity, but uniformity, because the weakest link is the state that doesn't have some of these measures in place. And I think we went off topic slightly. I thought, what was your question again, Greg? Because I thought we were going to talk about we've talked about fake Texans, we've got a few fake Virginians.
Absolutely, it's dealing with a fraudulent application for a resident producer.
Oh, so actually someone stealing an ID. Yeah, so we do have occasionally, we do get calls from even, total strangers, non-insurance agents who say, I've just found out I have a license in Virginia, and I'm not an insurance agent. Who did that? And then we go and take a look. And this person did take our exam, and we do have photographs of that. We do have video, and we have access to our DMV databases. I can pull up your driving license, and then we can find out that you're not the person you say you are. But that's kind of, how we handle it in Virginia. Until someone calls us and says, that's not me, or someone's using my MPN. It could be an agent that someone else is using your MPN, pretending to be you, to sell insurance. And that's how we normally get alerted to those situations.
Perfect.
And to kind of go along with what folks were saying earlier, one of the challenges that we have in Pennsylvania is we actually offer the test in languages that other states don't offer. So we actually sometimes have folks that come to us to take the test and maybe don't tell the truth where they really live because they want to take the test in the language that they understand. What's always amazing is the pass rate is really high. And I don't think there's any cheating other than the cheating of you don't really live in Pennsylvania. You live in New York, or you live in Illinois, or you live someplace else. So we also have it in the reverse, and we think that's more along the lines of folks being more comfortable taking it in a language that maybe isn't offered in their home state.
Lee, do you have anything to add?
Just that we probably get those notifications through consumer complaints, either that or because we don't fingerprint, we do a background check, but we don't fingerprint. And so if this person gets our resident license and goes to another state and they fingerprint them, we're going to know about it then, and then you're going to get revoked because you didn't tell us about your felony. So we do have ways to find out. It just sometimes goes a little bit longer than what we hope.
Okay, great. And thank you, because you guys touched on also the resources and procedures in place for you guys to catch that. So the other question I would have on top of that is, and Lee, I'll start picking on you first. What advice would you give to a consumer who suspect that they are a victim of that situation? So if they, not just from the regulator side, obviously, but what advice are you giving them from your side?
Well, first of all, contact the Department of Insurance. We have the resources, the investigators, all the staff that can look into those issues. If someone sells them a policy and they're not licensed, it wouldn't necessarily mean the policy is fraudulent, but they have sold it in a fraudulent manner, and they probably would have, I guess, had access to some licensed producer's information in order to submit a policy application. But, contact the department and, call the company. If you get something in the mail and you didn't purchase it and it says you've paid a premium and you've got this coverage, start asking questions. Call the company, but the department's probably the easiest to get a hold of. And we have staff that can certainly get to the bottom of that. And, if that happens, companies are always very cooperative in those situations. They don't want to see a consumer harmed at all.
Great.
No, I think everybody that's a regulator in here knows that we don't know what we don't know. So if folks don't tell us, there's a chance we don't know about it, or we'll find out about it after a lot of damage has been done. So, be sure that you let us know if you do believe that's happening. We're lucky in Pennsylvania. We have some great investigators that are able to really figure things out and help people. So,
great. Richard, Lori, anything to add?
No, I would say I would agree, we would be the place for them to start with us, especially if it was actually true fraud that might require a law enforcement referral. We would be in the best position to get that ball rolling. Or we would have maybe the best contacts that we would know within the insurance company, especially if it was a complex situation, to get the quickest resolution for that consumer.
Great, thank you. Very good. We're going to move on now to the topic of termination for cause. And Lori, I'll start with you.
Oh, it's my favorite topic.
Yes, I'm sorry.
There was a question, sorry about that.
Yes, thank you.
There was a question in chat, and it was for the 10 minutes ago. We had a topic here for Virginia. What vendor does Virginia use? And so, the previous topic.
Sure, we use Prometric for all our examination, administering our licensing exams.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. So my question on termination for cause. What are the most common reporting failures insurers make when filing a for-cause termination?
Well, the biggest problem that we see when we get the termination for cause is it's producer licensing model act language. You have to notify us within so many days if you've terminated a producer for cause, which for cause means it's something that they could get their license revoked for. It doesn't mean they wore a blue tie on Red Tie Thursday. It doesn't mean they baked oatmeal cookies and nobody likes oatmeal cookies. Those are not terminations for cause. But what we find is we get a single page letter on the company letterhead, and it says, we're informing you we have terminated, agent XYZ, NPN number, blah, blah, blah. This is a termination for cause because they did bad things. And it's signed Compliance Department. Follow up if any additional information is needed. There's no name, because we know like insurance companies employ like 5-6 people that we could pick from. No phone number, no email, just Compliance Department and the standard administrative address for the headquarters of the carrier. Who do I even start asking for why? I mean, the termination for cause without even a statement about what exactly did they do? What bad thing was it? And just at that point, we are grasping at straws. Well, we might call some of the contacts that we have in our records. Hey, can you point me in the right direction, please, about who to follow up with this? And that just creates extra work and extra delays on our part or who we've reached out to in the company, just to get that to the right place so we can get the information we need. Because both regulators and the industry want bad actors out of the game. And I just want to preface, we're talking about kind of bad stuff. This is a very small population we're dealing with. The vast majorities of producers, adjusters, and other professionals out there aren't doing bad things. This is that small group of people who keep us busy. And we want to get them out of the game because it's best for everybody, because as this has been reiterated in this is a confidence-based industry, and we have to make sure we maintain that confidence. But when we're hitting roadblocks in our ability to pull those bad apples out of the business, that's not good for anybody. We also will find that when we do get we reach out and we get the information back, we can't give that to you because it's private, secret, whatever, or it's so heavily redacted that I don't have actionable evidence of which to proceed, and it further draws out the process. Another thing that we find is that licensing will receive the termination for cause. but at the same time, a fraud referral report was also filed. And fraud division has it. They're working on it. We don't know necessarily about in licensing because so much of fraud investigations are confidential record that's not necessarily being shared. We don't know what they're doing. We're also looking at the same thing from the licensing perspective to find out when we've chatted in the hallway, you're thinking about, we need to talk about this. And we find out that there's been multiple individuals in the building basically looking at the same file. And I don't know if that's always necessary, but if you did do a fraud referral, maybe let us know when you file the termination for cause information with licensing that, hey, this has already been a fraud referral, and maybe we could, kind of coordinate efforts a little bit better instead of us working in these silos.
Please, is there?
Thank you, Greg. So I hope there's no insurance companies in the room. Are there? Oh, there are a few. Okay, so I'll be delicate. So there are only 4 reasons, I believe, you can terminate an appointment for. I think one's voluntary termination, which is benign. You got death, which I don't get many of those, appointed in error, and canceled for cause. You'd be surprised how many times we get canceled for cause notifications, and 99% of them, after we send out an investigator who has to call the contact, and just like Laurie, he's chasing he's chasing ghosts, trying to figure out who, what, where, and when. And 99% of the time, it's canceled for the lack of production. You're not selling enough insurance, you're gone. And so, working with our partners at Vertifor, we're a Circon state here in Virginia. We now have, I think it's up now, a pop-up now that will show up. When you're about to press that button to terminate for cause, a little big notice sits on the screen. You can't ignore it. And it tells you, these are the reasons you can terminate for cause, otherwise try again. And so we're hoping that will somewhat diminish the number of forced termination for causes. And as I said, I think, documentation is often lacking in even the ones that are legitimately terminated for cause for, misrepresentation, misappropriation of premium, forgery, fraud, various different things that are spelled out nicely in the PLMA. And if you don't know what the PLMA is, the Producer Licensing Model Act is a wonderful guiding document. I think most states use that, have it in their code. And so, we're chasing documentation, and there is a notification process, there's a timeline that you have to follow when filing for termination for cause. So for any insurance companies out there who are not familiar with the process, we ask you to give us a call, drop us an email, and we'd be happy to help you with that process.
Great, thank you. Lee?
I think that there's a lot of confusion out there about, when, of course, you've heard them say the terminations for cause and what those, it's a violation of a law. And we often get just the opposite, though. We will get an electronic termination that's not for cause, and then we will find out that they've gotten a fraud referral, that this person has stolen all this money and so forth. And, by the time that we get it in licensing, it's not corrected yet. We too don't share information, or fraud does not share information with our licensing division, just very little, but we don't share documents or anything. So we won't find out and get the documents and all the information on the consumer side until much later. So, if you've got someone that is a bad actor, a termination for cause reason, I can't speak for all the states, but I know for ours, it shows on PDB as being terminated for cause. So it will alert the other states, and that's just good information to get out there as soon as you can.
Dave?
I think I'm just kind of echoing everyone else,
Okay.
In relation to just not identifying which state the insureds or licensees are located, and not providing specific details.
Perfect.
We're hearing the same things.
No, absolutely. And then I can start with you on the next part as far as what's a regulator's typical timeline for investigating for the cause termination report? What factors might expedite it? What can you say about that?
Are you asking me?
I am asking you.
Oh. I wish I could give you exact numbers because every investigation is just a little bit different. Every fact leads you down a little bit of a different path. You know, in relation to our handling, we assign the investigator promptly. They investigate it immediately, and then where it goes from there is just up to the investigation itself.
Great.
For us, the timeline is, it depends. And like you said, every case is different. When we have noticed a real uptick, though, in companies, when they report a termination for cause, they will report it to fraud and licensing pretty much at the same time. So what we do, we open a case in both divisions, and if fraud is looking at it, we don't touch it until they get through looking at it. We don't want to tip anyone off or, you know, let them know they're under investigation until fraud contacts them and gets enough information. But if fraud is not going to open a case and we're taking it on the civil side, we first send a letter to the company because we want to get all the details. And then we can draft correspondence to the licensee to get their side of the story. But it's generally very fast. If the consumer side is taking it first or taking over, it's generally a very quick, probably within, 15 working days that we contact the company to get all the details.
Great. And Laura and Richard, I'm guessing you guys would probably say about the same thing as far as it depends, but would you say anything that there is to expedite that or that would necessarily delay that worth mentioning?
The only thing that expedited is how quickly we get the detailed information from the carrier so we know exactly what we're dealing with. That's usually the longest time in our ability to act, is that time we are waiting to receive that information.
Same.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, yes, thank you.
Apologize. So we had a couple of comments here. Connecticut has created a universal termination for cause form that requires companies to report certain details. So that was just a comment that came in from the chat. Then there is a question here. Different states have different termination reasons. Not all states have for cause reason electronically to submit. How can industry have a clear way to determine that individuals have been terminated for cause in any state?
We might leave that up, Tiffany. We might want to.
Yeah,
Did you guys get all that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Well, NIPR people, you can let me know to make sure Louisiana has the termination for cause code. If they're submitting that electronically, I'm pretty positive that we do. So I'm not sure. I think we got that.
We have a lot. We have a lot of termination for cause reasons. It really depends on the state. I don't know where.
Tiffany, do you have a mic?
A lot of people here. Mic. Can everybody hear me?
I'm coming.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay, so anybody in the room that's a state regulator that has your business rules through NAPR, we have a lot of people in the room that can assist you over the next couple of days to look at them. But generally speaking, we drive off of state's rules. So the terminations for cause, there's reasons. Some states have up to a dozen. So I heard 4 for Richard.
Yeah, 4.
We have states that have at least a dozen. So just, it's really, I don't want to speak to all states. It's really, I'd rather go state by state here. There used to be a uniform process. I hate to date myself, but about 2000, there was an actual uniform appointment form. And then there was this termination for cause guidance and not for cause guidance. Over the years, states have kind of taken their own positions on what do they want electronically processed and how. But Most states at least have two codes, for cause and not for cause. And then the carrier is going to follow up based on all of your requests.
Allegedly follow up.
Yes, the process under PLMA has all kinds of language, and it's got termination for cause, has the process, it has the timelines, it has the information that has to be submitted. There's a lot of confidentiality in that documentation. A lot of carriers want to protect it. There's a lot of support in model law and also probably your state law if you've adopted it. Does that kind of help?
Yeah,
If
and
anybody wants to know about your specific rules, there's a whole team of people here at NAPR that can help you.
But I also want to even like just add to that, that if the carrier is reporting it to us, this is termination for cause and this was the reason, just as Richard said, a lot of the times it's not a termination for cause because it's very specifically, does it constitute grounds? And it's the same list that was in the Model Act of which a license can get revoked. And if they're not those things and it's a contractual violation or some other things that might have been bad in the scope of their employment and violated an employment term, but did not necessarily violate the insurance code, then it is not a termination for cause. So I don't necessarily know that I would want that reported by the carrier on the PDB as a termination for cause when we looked at it and it's absolutely not a termination for cause. So that's, I think maybe the best way to tell if there was that termination for cause and it was truly for cause is there's going to more than likely be a resulting administrative action taken by a state in that situation, and that would be on RIARS, and that's what other regulators could see, that final researched, adjudicated final action that would the other regulators could see, and I think that would be the most reliable.
And then remember, NAPR, business rules, we check all RIARS, and it will defer to the states.
Yes. And I think another important thing would be for the folks to make sure they provide us a specific person to contact so we can get the additional information. So that, you know, because we are dealing with that case by case, knowing who we should reach out to if we need more info would be really helpful as well.
Great, thank you. So given the time we've got, I want to jump ahead a little bit. I want to move to a favorite topic of everyone, which is adjuster licensing. Lori, I'm going to pick on you first.
Why?
Well, you are the vice chair
yeah.
of the adjuster licensing.
I am. Actually, I love it. I love adjuster license. I will talk about this all day, every day.
Awesome. So
I'm so much fun at parties.
I'll go with an easy one then, okay? So
Wait, there are no easy adjuster licensing questions.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, I'll just go with the first one. There has been an ongoing discussion concerning designated home state license. Is there a path to simplify the process for residents of non-licensing states?
Well, that's crazy talk there. You're talking uniformity, reciprocity, all those kind of wonderful things, but I do have an answer for you. All right, and we all know, like, I've done this long enough to remember in the late 90s when adjuster licensing, when I first started in this business, you had like a chart, and it was the list of the states. Like if you took exam in this state, and this state, then through these desk rule reciprocity groups that you could get your reciprocal licenses everywhere you needed to. Because there are states that simply don't have any adjuster licensing. And there are some states that only require it for the independent adjuster, but don't require it for the company or the staff adjuster. So it's a complex scenario to begin with. So then we came up with the idea of the designated home state. Your home state doesn't license, you could go pick a state. And that really came out and it solved that, do I have to take multiple state exam question? Not completely. We all know that's not completely California, New York. But for the most part, it eliminated that having to take those multiple exams to get multiple state license. So that was good. It was a big step, for what we were dealing with. But let's fast forward, to 25 years, 30 years past that. I'm aging myself up here. what's, you know, what are the outcomes of having that designated home state? Well, some of it was allowing that adjuster to self-report or self-designate that home state without the knowledge of the regulator of the state that they said was their designated home state. Like an example, it was an application that had come in. First was a Texas resident. We're really close to Texas, so we get a lot of cross-state business. I'm not picking on Texas. I love Texas. But it was a Texas resident who filed an application with us and said Minnesota was their designated home state. No, it's not. Your Texas license was actually lapsed. Your Texas resident license was lapsed because they didn't do their CE. That's what the PDB said. But their only active license at the time was Minnesota. Like, oh, my designated home state's Minnesota. Here's my app. No license for you. I'm so sorry. Go get your license properly in your home state. So that was a challenge. States where have CE requirements, they were picking designated home states that didn't have a CE requirement. They don't think about that on day one, but 2 years down the road when you want to go renew a license and 13 other states go, you got to do our CE. And you don't want to face that the day before you had to renew the license. So there's long-term consequences for poor decision making. And plus there's inconsistencies with how designated home state information is reported. And we do have to do better in getting in there. And so what does that look like on the regulatory side when we're dealing with this landscape? Now, Louisiana's state that we require both independent and staff adjusters to be licensed. So we're in that smaller group of 16 that have that requirement. So I have my staff, I have a grid. It's a big old spreadsheet that I write out, like what's the applicant's resident state, what's their home state, what's their DHS, can they use the designated home state? And sometimes that column, can they use a DHS, is maybe. And that's not a good regulatory, but maybe. Because what we see happening is they'll start out their career as a staff adjuster. That's a logical place where they're going to start their work. And they live in a state that doesn't require the staff adjuster, only the independent. So they got a designated home state because their home state didn't require it. But as their career evolved, now they've moved to the independent side. So really, they shouldn't have a designated home state anymore. They should get that resident license in their home state now if you're going to follow the way that's supposed to work. And it's really hard to tell whether they're a staff adjuster or an independent adjuster. There's really very few states appoint adjusters, so it's really hard to figure that out. And these lead to just a lot of challenges in regulars to making sure you're properly licensed in the state that you live in. I mean, think about that in the producer world. Would we ever accept that in a producer license? It's like, I live in Louisiana, but I don't really do any business here, so Alabama's my home state. In the producer world, we would think that is insane, but we tacitly accept that every single day in the adjuster space because that's what we have to work with. And then adding to that, these conversations are continuing to evolve. We now have Wyoming and New Mexico and Rhode Island coming up that have taken the position, well, can you get the license in your home state? It's not, you don't have to, but can you? Is that such an awful concept? That's something that's also having discussions. But as all these things are coming up, the adjuster licensing working group, there's a lot of very passionate people in the adjuster licensing space who participate in this forum. And we're having these discussions about, can we just sit down and maybe iron out where are pain points? What are the real problems? We're talking about how we're processing, and we're finding we're having commonalities in where our internal processes are getting hung up. And if we can come to a consensus of where can we identify what the problems are, what kind of solutions we can, then we could come as a group, and that's where we would work with our industry partners and NIPR to help us come as a group once we find, when we say what we want, to create a solution. Because if we can make this streamlined, that's better for everybody. No one wants, after you've had a disaster, to have to wait to issue adjuster licensing. You want to get those folks out there as quickly as possible. So anything that streamlines that process is just literally better for everybody. And we're having a lot of those productive talks now.
Great. Thank you, Lori. And obviously, we could discuss adjuster licensing much more. There's many more areas. Unfortunately, we are out of time for the panel, so I can't bug them anymore. That's I like picking on them. So I want to thank the panel very much. I know that we barely touched on everything, but I much appreciated. If you do have any questions, I don't know if you guys will be hanging around for a little bit, but we are short on time, so we're going to go ahead and end this. Thank you guys very much for joining us.